It began with whispers, missing daughters, silent cries for help, and then the discovery of bodies. 42 young women brutally murdered, their lives cut short. This is the story of Jumaisi Khalusha, the man who turned the streets of Nairobi into his hunting ground. A story of terror, betrayal, and a justice system that let the monster slip away. It was a warm evening in Nairobi, late July 2024. The city buzzed with its usual life. Vendors calling out their prices, bodabodas weaving through traffic, and the chatter of residents settling in after a long day. Among them was Maria Nyambura, a 23-year-old college student, hurrying to catch a ride home after her late class. She had done this countless times before, flagging down a motorcycle taxi for a quick, cheap ride back to her dormitory. This night, her driver was a polite man, middle-aged, with a faint smile that barely reached his eyes. He said his name was Collins. Maria climbed onto the back of the bike, unaware that this ride would be her last. The next morning, her friends realized she hadn't come home. Panic set in as calls to her phone went unanswered. A report was filed, but like so many missing women in Nairobi, the case initially received little attention. A week later, in the early hours of a chilly morning, workers at the Kware Quarry stumbled upon something that would haunt them forever. At first, it looked like a pile of discarded trash, but as they drew closer, the stench made them stop in their tracks. Inside a torn plastic bag lay the mutilated remains of a young woman. She had been strangled, dismembered, and abandoned like garbage. The police arrived shortly after, cordoning off the area. This wasn't the first time a body had been discovered here. Over the past year, the quarry had become a dumping ground for unidentified remains, each discovery more gruesome than the last. But this time was different. This time, the community was demanding answers. The investigation began quietly, with officers piecing together reports of missing women. There were patterns. The victims were young, often students or domestic workers, all last seen accepting rides from boda drivers. But Nairobi was teeming with bodas. How could they narrow it down? The police were overwhelmed, juggling hundreds of missing person reports and facing mounting pressure from the public. Then came the breakthrough. A witness from a nearby village recalled seeing a boda driver acting suspiciously near the quarry the night before the body was found. The description was vague, but it was enough to raise suspicions. The police intensified their surveillance of local drivers. For weeks, Jumaisi Khalusha went about his life as if nothing had happened. He picked up passengers, attended church on Sundays, and smiled at neighbors. No one suspected that beneath his calm exterior lay a man capable of unimaginable evil. Collins was a 33-year-old boda driver, well known in the community for being polite and reliable. But behind closed doors, his demons consumed him. He had perfected his routine, luring women with promises of safety or jobs, driving them to the desolate Kware Quarry, and carrying out his horrific crimes. He kept trophies from some of his victims, small personal items that fed his twisted sense of control. On July 15, 2024, Jumaisi Khalusha made the mistake that would unravel his carefully hidden crimes. It started as it always did. A young woman, tired after a long day, flagged down a boda driver for a ride home. The driver, Collins, smiled and nodded. His demeanor was polite, reassuring even. She climbed onto the back of the bike, never suspecting the nightmare that awaited her. But something felt wrong. The route wasn't familiar. The streets grew darker and emptier. When she questioned him, Collins gave vague answers, his tone calm but evasive. The unease turned to terror when he stopped the motorcycle in a secluded area near the Kware Quarry. As Collins attempted to restrain her, adrenaline took over. She fought back, scratching and kicking until she managed to break free. Without looking back, she ran as fast as her legs would carry her, stumbling over rocks and gravel, desperate to find help. Eventually, she reached a small local police station. Barely able to catch her breath, she described her attacker in vivid detail, a middle-aged boda driver with a dark helmet, riding a scratched motorcycle. The police immediately recognized the description. For weeks, they had been building a profile of a suspect linked to a series of murders near the Kware Quarry. The young woman's account matched everything they knew about the man they had been chasing. That evening, officers patrolled the neighborhoods near the quarry. Around 9 p.m., they spotted a motorcycle parked in front of a modest home, its tires caked with quarry dust. The rider, Collins, stepped outside, startled by the flashing lights. Collins didn't resist. His calm demeanor, almost unsettling in its normalcy, never wavered. As officers handcuffed him and placed him in the back of the police vehicle, neighbors gathered, whispering in shock. At first, Collins denied everything. He insisted he was just a hard-working boda driver trying to make a living. His voice was steady, his answers rehearsed, but the detectives had seen this before. They knew when someone was hiding the truth. For hours they pressed him, presenting evidence. Witness testimonies placing him near the quarry on multiple nights. The description given by the woman who had escaped. Dust from the quarry found on his motorcycle tires. Collins remained silent, his expression unreadable. But when detectives mentioned the name of his first known victim, his wife, Imelda Judith Kalenya, something shifted. The mention of Imelda's name seemed to break his composure. The detectives seized the moment, leaning in with questions. Why did you kill her, Collins? What happened that night? For the first time, Collins hesitated. His breathing grew heavier. The silence in the room became deafening. Finally, Collins began to speak. His words were cold, detached, almost clinical. He admitted to killing Imelda, describing it as an accident at first, but later admitting that it was premeditated. After his wife's murder, Collins said, something inside him changed. He felt a sense of power, a release that he had never experienced before. That feeling became an addiction, one that drove him to kill again and again. He detailed how he lured his victims, always choosing women who seemed vulnerable or distracted. Most of them were students, domestic workers, or women traveling alone. He used his position as a boda driver to gain their trust, offering them rides home or promising job opportunities. Once he had their trust, Collins would drive them to the desolate Kware Quarry. He chose the location carefully, remote, silent, and shielded by dense vegetation. He described how he strangled his victims, his voice devoid of emotion. Some fought back, but he was always prepared. Afterward, he dismembered their bodies to make disposal easier, stuffing their remains into plastic bags. He dumped the bags in the quarry, confident that no one would find them or connect the dots. Based on his confession, Collins led detectives to the Kware Quarry. What they found there was beyond horrifying. Human remains scattered among the rocks, some so decomposed they were almost unrecognizable. In total, Collins confessed to murdering 42 women over a span of 2 years. Each killing, he said, gave him a sense of control he couldn't find anywhere else. When asked if he felt any remorse, Collins simply shrugged. They were just there, he said, his tone disturbingly casual. News of Collins' confession spread quickly, sending shockwaves across Kenya. The media labeled him the Vampire of Kware, a name that captured the brutality of his crimes. For the families of the victims, the confession was both a relief and a fresh wound. They finally had answers, but the details were almost too much to bear. Police promised swift justice. The case against Collins was airtight, and a trial was set to begin. But just as Nairobi began to breathe a sigh of relief, the unthinkable happened. Collins escaped custody. On August 20th, 2024, Collins escaped from custody, along with 12 other detainees.
Extraordinary case that really highlights the deep mistrust that the Kenyan public has in its security services. It seems that he escaped this morning from a police station by cutting open wires of the outside section where prisoners will go outside along with 12 other Eritrean nationals.
He cut through a wire mesh and scaled the station's perimeter wall under the cover of darkness. The news sent Nairobi into chaos. Women once again feared walking alone, knowing the monster was still out there. Preliminary investigations revealed alarming allegations of police negligence, or worse, active assistance in his escape. 8 officers, including the station commanders, were suspended. A nationwide manhunt ensued. Police checkpoints were set up across the city, and the government offered a substantial cash reward for information leading to his capture. But Collins had spent years evading detection. He knew how to disappear into Nairobi's chaos, blending into the very streets he once hunted. As days turned into weeks, the trail grew cold. The escape of the Vampire of Kware became a symbol of systemic failure in Kenya. Protests erupted, with citizens demanding accountability and reform within law enforcement. For the families of Collins' victims, the pain was unbearable. Their daughters, sisters, and friends had been taken, and now the man responsible was free. Collins' Jumaisi Khalusha remains at large, his whereabouts still unknown, despite a relentless manhunt. His story is one that haunts, a stark reminder of the darkness that can thrive unnoticed in society. His crimes exposed the flaws in the systems meant to protect the vulnerable, leaving a trail of destruction that has yet to be fully healed. For the women of Nairobi, His presence is felt in every corner, a shadow that continues to loom over them. The search persists, but one thing is clear: the voices of his victims will never fade into silence. They will be remembered, their stories never forgotten as long as the search for justice endures.